I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a guest we had on, a new guest that we had on just a few months ago, and he dropped some revelations on us about splits in the government, about intelligence. Of course, he's a 20-year veteran CIA, former CIA agent. He understands Russia. He understands Iran. He speaks Russian. I'm talking about Scott Uehlinger. Scott Uehlinger, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Thanks to be back. Thanks.
I know you're going to be teaching also a course coming up at NYU about counterintelligence and intelligence issues and things like that. Also, you're becoming a bit of a media star, a television commentator, and we're really happy to have you.
Thanks, and I appreciate the opportunity that USA Watchdog afforded me. Thank you.
Listen, I want to talk about this Hillary Clinton email scandal. I mean, I think she had a private server so she could sell favors out of the State Department and enrich herself, her and Bill Clinton. But what do I know? I can't prove that. But the fact remains, she had a private server in her house. It was unprotected. It was backed up on an unprotected cloud. There was all kinds of classified documents and stuff that really shouldn't. Some of the documents are so secret they can't release them. Some of these documents are so secret the FBI investigators investigating can't even look at the documents.
Exactly.
So she did have some secret, top secret stuff on there. Releasing stuff like this for guys like you in the field, and that's where you spent most of your career, can get you killed. What are your thoughts about Hillary Clinton's defense for her email server, that she didn't do anything wrong?
Right. Well, what the Clintons rely on is the fact that most Americans don't really understand the security procedures, and so they can throw up a lot of smoke and mirrors that confuses people and makes them think this wasn't so much of a problem. But people in the military and people who are in the intelligence community understand this better, and certainly it is even worse than it appears.
What do you mean by being worse than it appears? You think that?
Well, Greg, you were spot on in your assessment of what you said. The fact that she set up a private server in and of itself she's guilty of a felony right there. She was obviously, by planning to have a private server, she was conspiring to evade her signed sworn statements that she would uphold secrecy agreements. The fact that she simply established that, regardless of what was on it, shows that she intended to go around, circumvent the law. And then, of course, we have more than 100 highly classified emails on the server. And the fact that this server is absolutely vulnerable to any Chinese, Russian, or Iranian hacking. And this is the greatest disaster or mishandling of classified information at the upper levels of the U.S. government in history. There's no question about it. And people like myself and the former head of the DIA has spoken about this, are visibly angry about this, because we all know that if I had performed one single offense similar to this, I would be sitting in Leavenworth, Kansas right now.
Well, Petraeus just showed some documents and has some documents in his desk and showed it to his biographer who had a security clearance. I know some tawdry details around that, but you're thinking that there's no question that the server was hacked.
I would say I virtually guarantee that. Exactly. I would say that with 95% certainty it was hacked. There's almost no question about it. Plus, the Petraeus thing actually is an interesting guide, because Petraeus, we don't know exactly what he gave over, but there has been talk in the press that I've read that Petraeus actually gave her a copy of his schedule. People of that level, even their schedules are classified information. Now, we cannot even begin to compare the damage of General Petraeus' schedule, which is immediately obsolete after a week or so, compared to highly sensitive information that apparently involved U.S. technical means and things like that, that's so high in classification that the FBI agents investigating her case were not allowed to see. I mean, this is a quantum leap in mishandling of classified information, far and above anything that Petraeus did. But yet, look at what was done to him, and compare that to what the present inaction going on with Hillary Clinton's case.
Putin, about 2 weeks before 9/11/12, the Benghazi thing, was out And I remember talking about this. I thought, well, that's an interesting quote. He was on saying, when you supply weapons to terrorists and when you get into bed with terrorists, in effect, was he saying, I don't know what the exact quote was, it can blow up in your face. And then Shazam, 9/11/12 happened and 4 Americans died. Do you think they had hacked the server and he had information? Because he was like, wow, that's very chilling now looking back on it. I think he had hacked it. I think he talked like he knew what was going on.
I hadn't thought about that, but certainly I think that is a legitimate possibility, given what you just told me. That makes sense to me. Ironically enough, I literally reported back to the United States on 9/11 of 2012, and my first night in the United States being married, and the next morning I woke up at my parents' house to find out the Benghazi thing happened. So it was literally the day I arrived from overseas. So you can imagine my emotions as to those poor guys who were left out there, because literally it could have been me.
Well, let's move on. Talk about Iran. Been quoted out last week saying that missiles is the key to Iran's future, not negotiations. Also, the Russians have just given the S-300 missile to the Iranians. I know there's a higher level S-400, S-500. I know, but still S-300 is formidable. And so what do you make of Iran and the non-deal, because nothing's signed, the non-deal deal, and Iran saying that their future is based in missiles, not negotiations?
Right. Certainly, it's no surprise to anyone who follows Iran or follows the way their government has done things since the revolution in 1979. None of this is a surprise to people like us. However, this is a surprise to this administration, which just has a willful blindness and an ideology it sticks to and doesn't want to hear anything to the contrary. So they wanted to conclude something with Iran, and it was done, even though all evidence pointed that this would be a disaster. And it's absolutely what you said. In fact, a few weeks ago...
You think the Iran deal is, in your estimation as a former CIA agent, you think it's a disaster?
It's an absolute disaster. It's unconscionable. The fact that you can have a non-agreement agreement, as you like to call it, because it's the truth, and you're going to release money that has been seized by the international community since 1979, and now you're going to unfreeze that, and the Iranians themselves are admitting that they're going to use some of that money for terrorist activity. They're progressing with their missile activity and threatening the United States for daring to criticize them because the missiles were not included in the nuclear deal. But they're just demonstrating their contempt for our government and their contempt for our weakness, and they're going to increase the chances of a war in the Middle East, not decrease it.
Well, those are powerful words, man.
It is, but it's simply the truth. This is okay. I have certain ways of seeing things as a former CIA officer, but what I'm saying is anyone who understands the Middle East, anyone who does any reading or has lived through the period since the Iranian Revolution knows this to be true, as you do. It's literally an unbelievable debacle that if 10 years ago you had suggested this to anyone of any intellectual standing, they would have rejected it as being absolutely insane. But yet here we are, and it's a fact.
Now that I have you on, I want to talk about recently Russia announced that they were lowering their troops, calling some of their troops home, but yet they still have a new air base in Syria. They have their naval base in Tartus. I don't think they're giving up either one of those. What do you make of them, this announcement that they're going to take some of their troops off the table in Syria?
Right. That's typical Russian grandstanding. Putin probably has withdrawn some troops, but most important, the infrastructure has been left in place, and it's a much better. He has built the place up, especially the airfield there, to a much higher degree than it was before the Russian Air Force arrived. So I mean, they're ready to come back in a big way, and they have a certain level of maintenance personnel and support personnel there, so they can ramp up in a matter of 2 weeks or so. And resume the high level of air activity that you saw several weeks ago. So it's theater, and Putin is not going to throw away this advantage. He has scored big by coming back to the Middle East after a 20-year hiatus on the part of Russia. Russia is back in the Middle East in a big way, and he's showing his loyalty to the Assad regime, which, despite the fact that a lot of the Middle Easterners might not care for Russians and might not care for Assad, the fact that you are saying you're going to stand by your friend, no matter how despicable he is, through all, in all conditions, is going to resonate throughout the Middle East as the Russians look to be stand-up guys who are going to stand by their traditional ally. So, Putin has gained tremendous diplomatic cachet from this action.
So you think this adds to the increased possibility of war because their allies, Iran, they're giving them missiles, they're staying there. So you think that this is just
right, I mean,
this is just ramping up. Things aren't dying down. Things are ramping up.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some reports, in the past year, arms purchases, certainly Iran's arms purchases. Now they have $150 billion more to buy weapons with. I think the S-300 deal was about $4 billion, and they're continuing to, and they're also going to be buying the latest Sukhoi and MiG attack aircraft and fighter aircraft. That's another deal that they're working on. So right now, Iran is riding high. They've cowed the Americans. They're increasing their economic ties and military ties with Russia. Now, I don't think Russia wants to see Iran go crazy in the Middle East. However, but the Iranians themselves are going to feel really emboldened and empowered to maybe get away with more. And so this is going to increase the dangers of a gross miscalculation.
War in the Middle East, and you
right,
think
or more bloodshed anyway. Maybe not a war, but certainly more terrorist threats. An Iran that is emboldened, that is launching more rockets, that is continuing to develop its nuclear weapons, is going to feel further emboldened to increase its proxy terrorist attacks elsewhere, because now Iran is that much more difficult to bomb with the S-300 system. And then later on, nuclear weapons, Iran will be able to be more aggressive on the terrorist front because they won't have to fear retaliation by the West.
Whoa! So, do you think Iran already has a nuke or two right now? They may have gotten from the former Soviet Union and whatever.
I don't believe that that's the case. That they're continuing with their program. The Russians have in the past presented them with assistance on their civilian reactor at Bushehr. But they're continuing at pace, and they're just going to feel emboldened as they see the United States increasingly acquiescent to them. And this is not some great revelation on my part. Many government experts have been predicting this, that Iran, if it's newly confident, you're going to see increased terrorism abroad. Like, for instance, the Buenos Aires bombing, I think it was in the 90s, where they killed people at a Jewish center in Buenos Aires. Who would have thought that Iranian intelligence and terrorist elements were in South America targeting Jews? But they were, and these kinds of things are going to continue.
Now that I'm so glad that the shot cleared up here a little bit, but I want to get into this. You brought up the last that there was a big split. Hey, listen, inside the government, I mean, the CIA is being told to do things that they don't know if they like to do. That the Pentagon, Seymour Hersh, the great reporter, has also exposed this split that you were talking about, and that there's a split in the government. The Pentagon against the CIA in some areas like the Kurds. Is that overblown, or is that a real split? And that's just one of the symptoms. The Pentagon backing the Kurds and the CIA backing ISIS, Al Qaeda, the Free Syrian Army.
There is some tension there, but I think the two groups, the Pentagon and intelligence, backing different elements in Syria, points more to general lack of area knowledge or incompetence than it does in that they're deliberately trying to attack each other. The situation in Syria is very complicated. It's very hard for me to unravel, frankly. But some reporters have noted that, for instance, the Pentagon is supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces in one area of the country, and in a totally different, isolated area, CIA elements are supporting the same organization, but it's composed of different people with different mission priorities. So I think a feud between the two is overblown. However, what we should also pay attention to are the internal feuds going on in the military and in the intelligence community. Political correctness is doing a great deal of damage in the armed forces and in the intelligence community. For instance, now we have, speaking about the military, the Marine Corps has been mandated, despite their studies that have shown that women in infantry units are absolutely ineffective and would lower greatly the effectiveness of combat units. the Secretary of Defense mandated to the Marine Corps, you will integrate females into the infantry units, regardless of how many studies have been done that show that it's detrimental to fighting ability. So they've done that. And the Marine Corps apparently has decided to swallow that. In the intelligence community, you have a director of Central Intelligence who, he is a creature of Obama. Like Obama, he is afraid to ascribe that the danger that we face is Islamic fundamentalism. He'll say anything but the words Islamic fundamentalism. He will never join the words Islamist and terrorism. And I just was speaking to a more junior officer who left the agency after a few years. And I didn't really know the man, but it's clear he was a very intelligent and very capable officer. I could tell. And he was speaking about how he left the agency because he found it absolutely untenable to remain in it anymore. He actually said, I felt like I was in the lifeboat and the director of Central Intelligence was setting fire to the lifeboat. And so with any competent, and when competent people are confronted by these difficulties, they leave because they can always do something else. And this officer left the agency and is doing something else very well, but it's a real shame that we have these kinds of things happening to both the intelligence community and the military. They're pushing good officers and good men out, and the result is going to be increased incompetence, which we've seen. How many scandals has the Secret Service had in the past 5 years? The Secret Service didn't have those scandals 10 years ago. Now, everything they do is wrong, and now we'll be waiting for the next FBI scandal or CIA scandal based on incompetence. Because too many people are being placed in senior positions because of political cronyism and not because of legitimate, operational ability or analytic ability. I'm not the only person who's spoken about this. There's some very good articles written by a Mr. Fred Fleitz, who was a senior CIA analyst, and he is extremely critical of DCI Brennan. And my conversations with this junior officer about 2 weeks ago merely reinforce what he has written about.
I want to move on to politics. Trump, you are going to be you're in Pennsylvania. You're going to be a delegate, and you've told me off camera that you were probably going to vote for Trump. And I asked you an important question. I said, do you think he's being treated fairly? And you gave a pretty good answer. Tell me, you're going to be voting for Trump, but tell me your appraisal of what's going on the ground with Trump.
Certainly, I'm in the running to be a delegate. It doesn't mean on April 26th, the Pennsylvania primary, I'll find out if I am elected. And Pennsylvania is very important because also in Pennsylvania, the delegates are elected by name. People are voting for Scott Uehlinger. They're not voting for the delegate who supports Cruz or the delegate who supports Trump, which is the case in other states. So in this case, I generally support Trump. However, neither, and I see the good points of Mr. Cruz as well. However, Mr. Trump has had some problems with organization and lack of a ground game. There's some newspaper coverage of this. And now Mr. Trump is catching up very effectively. However, in the past, his ground game of speaking to delegates and these sorts of things in other states, in places like Louisiana and Texas, was not there. Now, he's learned from these mistakes and he's moving forward. But basically, Cruz has been an extremely organized factor in this election, and the Trump campaign is playing a bit of catch-up, I believe.
So you're saying less unfair and more his inexperience, and he kind of messed up some.
Yeah, I think that there has been he's been making some slip-ups, and some of it is based on inexperience. And certainly he is very castigated for things that, for instance, suggesting that we should slowly pause Islamic immigration until we understand who these people are is absolute common sense and is absolutely necessary. But yet some people construct that comment to be racist and full of hate. That is merely absolute common sense at work. As an intelligence officer, I would say that's absolutely what is required. We don't know the people coming into our country, and we have to get a hold of it. And when you're digging a hole, the first rule is stop digging.
One last question. Do you think, so some people out there just think Hillary Clinton will never be charged. And she's lost, 7 in a row.
Right.
She's struggling in New York. See, I don't think she can win. I made a prediction she couldn't win more than a year ago. And then once this all came up because Obama.
I hope you're right.
Obama hates Clinton. They hate each other.
Certainly.
And he really, they reported in the news that he was defending, he said, well, I continue to believe. Well, in the IRS scandal, he said there's not a smidgen of corruption. And now he says, I continue to believe. Lawyer talk. I think they're going to find out she can't win. And I think he's going to crush her. She's going to be charged. What do you, and he says they're not going to protect her. What do you think is going to happen with this thing? I mean, is there a case to charge her? Is she a felon?
So I certainly think that she is a felon. Like I said, the simple presence of the private server, which she has admitted to, is right there. That you need not prove any more than that. That is willful conspiracy to get around secrecy laws. However, you're right about there may come a time where the Obama administration decides to throw her under the bus. I think it would be Obama, an individual very concerned with his legacy, if he feels that he is at risk of losing his legacy by protecting Clinton. At that moment is when he will throw her under the bus. Now, maybe we haven't reached that point yet. But if Obama really thinks that my name is going to be tarnished by continuing to protect her, then that's a possibility. Certainly the FBI, they've said that the FBI director is a stand-up guy. I don't know anything about him, really. But if there have been some rumors that if basically this is not referred to the courts, that the FBI director would decide to resign. Now that would result in a firestorm, and certainly that's the sort of thing that would damage the president's credibility and might cause him to say, you know what, it's time to throw Mrs. Clinton under the bus.
I think he did that with the Fox, last week, the Fox interview, and he said she will not be protected. She's not above the law. And that, to me, I just said, I continue to believe. Of course he has to believe. They can't say, oh, yeah, I hired a dimwit, and I had her running the State Department and interfacing with the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the Pentagon, the White House. You can't say that.
That's right. You're right. I guess the thing I think most of all, as a former intel officer and 28 years in the Navy, in the Naval Reserve, is what would be the effect of morale on these forces if this woman were elected to office? Here we have somebody who egregiously mishandled the highest classified information we have. And she is now the chief executive and in charge of enforcing the nation's laws. And you have an intelligence community and military community that understands everything she did, that it's felonious, and she's scot-free. But if I make one single mistake, my career is over. How is that going to help the morale and good order of the military or the intelligence community?
Well, I hope your appraisal works, that comes true, because I think she stinks. I mean, I have said on my channel, forget about obstruction of justice and lying and mishandling documents. And she had a private server, gross negligence. Hello. So
That's
anyway,
right.
So you think you're handicapped? I'm gonna get you out on a limb here. Do you think she'll be charged?
Boy, I really don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. I've talked to some people who are also running as delegates, and their fear is that she will be charged. Because as much as we emotionally might like to see that happen, if this happened at the 11th hour, what might happen is Biden might be put up, and I know people who have greater fear of Biden running against either Cruz or Trump than Hillary. Hillary, it might be the best thing for the Republican Party for Hillary to remain where she is as a candidate, because she can be defeated. And other people are less sanguine that someone like Biden can be defeated by Cruz or Trump. So I don't know what I would prefer to see at this point.
Very good analysis. Thank you. Scott Uehlinger, former CIA agent, thank you so much for joining us on USAWatchdog.com. I hope other people book you to come on and give your analysis, because you sure gave some good stuff to us. Thank you very much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks a lot, Greg.